British people of Reddit, how is the American Revolution taught in your schools? They don't teach it. I'm 34 and didn't learn about it at school. Learned about the Roman Empire, Egypt, World Wars I and II and about the British Empire. Mainly Africa and Australia. They mention the War of Independence but that's about the extent of it. Nothing. We did lots of Roman/Anglo-Saxon/Viking, Norman stuff then straight to the World Wars. I think as someone else has said it's learning about things near your school that you can get to on a school trip. I only ever learned about it to add context to the French Revolution in 6th form. It actually came up in our A-levels and no one could answer the question because we had no idea what happened. It's not part of the national curriculum. We had a small mention of it in the context of discussing the cotton trade, but that was about it. Honestly, we talked about the American Civil War in relation to cotton more than the Revolutionary War, but that might be because I am from Manchester. It's usually covered briefly under the chapter covering the Georgians. We don't learn about the War of 1812 either. The War of 1812 is a footnote even in America. They either don't or I didn't pay attention. It wasn't. History lessons I remember were World War I and II, the Battle of Hastings, the Victorians and the Tudors. Edit. People keep asking about all manner of different historical topics. I honestly can't remember other than a couple of things people have jogged my memory on. I wasn't interested in history at school, so my memory and knowledge is limited. It wasn't. In the UK you learn about your own stuff, e.g. Scotland get William Wallace etc. England gets the Tudors and royal family. Then they just hit you with World War II. Except for Wales. Wales also gets England. It's not taught at all. To be fair, you guys would be teaching dozens of different revolutions if you had to cover all of them. There's a reason so many countries have Independence Days. I'm not from the UK, I'm from Thailand, thence I am. During the US Civil War, our king, Rama IV offered Abraham Lincoln a few war elephants to fight the Confederates. However, the offer was declined. On average a country celebrates independence from the UK every 7 days. We only go to school for 12 years, and we've got maths and shit to do. To Americans the War of Independence was obviously a huge conflict that led to the founding of a nation. To British, we have so much other military history, mainly Roman invasion, Norman conquest, 100-Year War, War of the Roses, Spanish Armada, English Civil War, Battle of Trafalgar/Waterloo, World War I, World War II to name a few, that it barely gets a mention. We also cover non-military history, e.g. Kings/Queens of England, life during medieval period, Henry VIII founding the Church of England, slavery, British Empire, Industrial Revolution, and learn a little about ancient history, Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, Celts. There's a lot to squeeze in that is arguably more relevant to UK's development as a nation, so we don't really cover it. 134 comments as of the time I write this, no one has mentioned that the word is taught. And #X200B, I'm sorry I couldn't not. Please forgive me. It isn't really. While it might be America's first war as a nation, I don't think it even makes the top 10 of the most interesting wars that Britain has been involved in. Although to the Americans, the revolution is extremely important and the founding of their nation, in British history it's just a footnote. The war itself was just seen as a part of the larger war with France. France backed the fledgling USA, trying to distract Britain from the war in Europe. Britain had to invest more heavily in North America than the French did, so it was a worthwhile distraction. The fact that the USA won was a bit of a surprise, to both the French and the British. Reading some of the comments on here, I think people need to understand that Britain has history going back millennia, while America has history that goes back a few hundred years. Other than the Civil War and American Revolution, there hasn't really been anything else in American history that is comparable to hundreds of wars/battles in British history, whether internationally or domestic. So, for America, these two events are massive, while they pale into insignificance in the UK. Even World War II had a lot more happening in the UK than in the US, who joined the effort later. America didn't experience the Blitz, the rationing or the evacuation of children from urban areas, for example. Nor did America have to rebuild cities and infrastructure, or deal with a whole generation of men wiped out or damaged by the war on the same scale as the UK. Other than troops deploying to Europe, life mostly continued as normal in America. Edit. Wow, did not expect my comment to get this reaction. Thanks to the two people who gave me gold and silver. Just want to take this opportunity to explain what I meant when comparing UK and USA losses, as some have taken my comment as belittling the USA losses, which wasn't my intention. It is relative to population percentage as a reflection of the impact it has on the country. World War II, the UK had a population of 46 million and lost approximately 450,000, and the USA had a population of 132 million and lost approx 415,000. Given that America's population was 3 times the size of the UK's population, the loss was more impactful to the country, but no less to individual families. This is also following World War I in the previous generation, where the UK lost approximately 900,000, 2% of population, and the USA lost 120,000, 1% of population. In my school it was taught as a war that was pointless for the British to carry on, as India was more valuable and Australia and its gold had just been claimed. Edit. To clear things up, when I refer to the gold in Australia, I'm not just referring to the literal gold. I was just too lazy to type that they had just claimed an entire large area of land and all its resources that were presumed to be on that land mass. In the grand scheme of things, we were just taught that Britain was too busy with other things to worry about America as much. I had a US boss who was shocked to discover that we were taught nothing about the Irish potato famine. The thing is, there's a lot of British history to get through, and a curriculum that went into all of it shallowly wouldn't teach you much about the detail of one event, and how you might find and weigh up different sources, etc. So we tend to study shorter periods of time more intensely. I remember doing the Victorians, which did include the Irish question, and the First World War. Earlier in school, I also remember studying Henry VIII, and our homework was to draw a picture of Henry VIII in uniform. The teacher then spent the first half of the next lecture taking the P out of the way we had drawn his groin. School days, best years of your life. I guess they thought it was strange due to the fact the US has the largest Irish diaspora, coupled with the fact that British land management exacerbated the famine. Swift is taught in American schools, and we had to read his satirical proposal that the Brits simply start eating the Irish. It isn't. To you it was the most important event in history, but to us it was Tuesday, a sideshow to the never-ending wars with France. The what? US Americans. How is British history taught in US schools? US schools are locally controlled, so you can find all kinds of things. In general, US students are taught lots of US history, which includes British history for background and is then intertwined from Jamestown until 1776. They are also taught a generally Eurocentric and English-centric version of world history. I don't think Americans realize just how little Brits care about the American Revolution. We ruled most of the known world at one time. America is just one part of a very large group of countries we once ruled. That's not to be offensive to Americans, it's just that there were so many colonies, many with much more wealth and importance at the time. ITT people act surprised their primary school history courses focus on their home country. It's not or wasn't when I was there. Bold of you to assume it's taught in our schools. We barely covered the wars of the Three Kingdoms properly. Not taught. Answering as someone who actually studied it. It came up as part of my A-level history. We learnt about the whole empire period and accepted that British people weren't the nicest then. As far as the revolution went, we looked at the causes and events leading to it. Was pretty interesting. Not a Brit, but an Australian. So not sure if you want to hear from me, but for what it's worth, we didn't really learn much about it in school as I remember anyway, at least not in the bog standard history classes for year 8 to 10, but it might have been covered in senior years where it was possible to do history as a core subject. We mainly focused on colonial history, World War I/II, Boer War, Boxer Rebellion I think. It was only after I left school and in the last few years was interested in history more so and watched some YouTube documentaries about the American Revolutionary Wars that I learned more about them. The only American history I remember studying at school was Native American history. Even then it was kind of tied into the theme of the history of medicine that we had going on at the time. It isn't really. It's a good tell of your age and location in the country as to what you were taught, but like most countries, British kids have a focus on history that affected the UK. I don't think it's deliberate in the sense of let's pretend we didn't lose, but given the earliest most people seem to be mentioning is the Romans, we had this too. That's still 2,000 years of history to cram into a few years. It's just not important enough, I don't think. It's not. Why would it be? It was a huge deal for America, but for the UK it was just another war in a crapload of wars. Oh well, that's that colony gone, whatever. The only overseas British interest I learned about was India, namely Gandhi and the partition of 1947. I learned about the Reformation, the dissolution of the monasteries, the English Civil War, and all the boring shit that happened before, during, and after. The only bit about America I learned about pre-20th century American history was Francis Drake, and only because he was Elizabeth I's favorite slang piece. Edit to add, we don't even cover our old prison island of Australia, and they still technically, only technically before anyone gets angry, belong to the Commonwealth, so why would we bother with America? Oh, and also I forgot another bit we covered that a lot about America pre-20th century, the slave trade. It isn't, but from what I've gathered you guys wasted a load of tea and then the French helped you out, but we didn't care because we preferred India. That taught is spelled with A and not O. I taught so. It wasn't taught much for me. It was mentioned every now and then, but I had to find out about on my own. Slavery was taught, however. No mentions of how the British Empire helped stop it in the end, though. You got to understand how much shit is considered more important for the Brits. One colony says fuck you and overthrows them. No big deal. Other than us being a superpower now, it is kind of insignificant for them to learn, I guess. You don't gain much tactical knowledge, for instance, other than don't fucking line up in bright red coats while Americans are hiding in the trees ambushing your asses, and you don't need a full class to learn that lesson, it's been learned. Also don't trust the French if you're British. Can I get a Vive la France to our oldest ally? America and France undefeated when allied, yo. It's very rarely taught. Like most countries in the world, the history syllabus focuses primarily on its own history, which is lamentable. Unlike a lot of other replies I'm seeing, we did get taught it. Very minor section of a topic. Basically got told about the causes, tax, Boston Massacre etc., the battles, and that we lost. Learned about Indian independence but not American one. The American Revolution wasn't that big event in world history. We weren't taught it at all. Bigger topics globally: Egypt, Greece, Rome, Renaissance, New World discoveries, French Revolution, World War I, World War II. It wasn't taught separately, just as a precursor to the French Revolution. Funny reading the American replies in here. Apparently, we're not taught it because we're embarrassed about it? No, not really. Unlike America, we have thousands of years worth of history. A lot of it embarrassing: the Roman invasion, the Viking invasion, the Norman invasion, the fall of the empire in India, the troubles in Northern Ireland, all of which we were taught about, and all of which are significant to our history. The American Revolution lasted 10 minutes, and had very little effect on us. Since then, we've become allies and fought side by side in 2 world wars, and many other conflicts. We'd rather focus on that.